White X. Okay.
JD Vance talking about, man.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. It's great to be back in Damascus. I visited during the campaign trail, and the governor was kind enough to show me around, not just last time, but this time as well. As you all know, I love the Appalachian region of our country, especially this particular part. It's beautiful, the people are kind and friendly, and they've got a great community here, but obviously got slammed very hard by the hurricane, and I think, unfortunately, while the people have done an incredible job at rebuilding this community, they have not had a federal government that's really been on their side. I've heard so many stories just in the last hour that I've been on the ground of federal agencies that have not developed and deployed the resources necessary, of federal bureaucrats that have been a barrier as opposed to a facilitator of some of the federal resources. And I think the country has decided collectively that we want to help the regions of our country that were devastated by this flood. So why are the bureaucrats not doing the American people's will and frankly holding up some of the aid here? I want to hear from the governor here in a second, but let me just say one last thing. I've been the Vice President of the United States for all of 7 days. This is, I think, my 7th day on the job, and this is an incredible place to have my first official trip. I heard so many good stories of good people helping their neighbors rebuild, of a woman at a church helping an elderly woman clean off photographs. That
I don't care what you say, man.
Or at least
JD Vance could probably wear this role pretty well, at least for the first 18 months. I want to see how JD Vance holds this when there may be internal disagreements with the administration, with infighting within the Republican caucus, where he may be needed for key decisions or maybe a key vote in the Senate. You never know what can happen or how this could play out, because we've seen how Mike Pence has become enemy of the Republican state, but JD Vance right now he's doing what he's got to do, looking like America's dad, right? He's looking like an American dad, if anything, right? I don't see a younger Donald Trump. I see someone who's like, listen, I'm just gonna ride the fence, ride the wave, and hopefully I don't get the same treatment Pence got. He just out here to do his job.
Damaged by the flood, of people who have volunteered their time, have come out of retirement, volunteered and donated their money to help people rebuild or fix houses. This is just an incredible place with incredible people, and I'm honored to be the vice president of a country that's as kind and generous as the people here in Damascus. So we're going to try to make sure the federal government does right by them.
See, here's the thing I want to know now too, because Vice President Vance said something not really alarming, but we kind of knew that the federal government, the government as a whole, it has processes and the payments are delayed, especially when it gets time to recovery or time for recovery. But if President Trump is going to give all the resources back to the states for natural disasters, what does that amount of money look like? Is it like $2 trillion to the side just in case of a disaster and you have to declare an emergency and the president has to do it to release the funds? Can you do it if, the state could go bankrupt, if nobody's living there, like a state like California, if people can't rebuild or whatever it may be? Is there going to be like a $5 trillion sidebar of money to help balance their state budgets or their local budgets from not having those property taxes? Because the property taxes on $1 million house are different from a plot of land that may be worth $200,000, but there's no structure there, right? I'm not paying taxes on that. I'm paying taxes on the physical land. And even if I am paying taxes, I am paying taxes on that land, but the taxes on that land may be $1,000 for the year for your local government versus maybe $200,000. So that loss will be felt by the local governments, but does that account into the disaster fund that the federal government will give to the states to say, hey, handle your cyclones and your tornadoes in Oklahoma. Here's the money. If you have citrus canker or hurricanes or any natural disaster or anything that comes through to ruin your crops or your livelihood in the state, your roads included, here's the money. I don't know if that's the best bet. We have like $100 billion budget in Florida, and there's still times where we have to put money not only aside, but to say, of course, the legislators put money aside, but to say, you know what, a lot of these projects cost, and we have to map it out over 2 or 3 years of planning with the federal government. We can't just say, hey, we're going to offset, do this one time and call it a day. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that anything that they're talking about is actually realistic, because what's happened, the damage from the hurricanes in Virginia, North Carolina, and other places, and also the the storm fired in LA, it has to be accounted for, saying, okay, if this is going to be the new federal policy, we're getting rid of FEMA, because it was the Department of Education, right? But if we're getting rid of FEMA, how is it going to make sure that the states are still solve it? That, I guess, what if we have like 1,000 natural disasters? If God says, you know what, let's test it out, right? How are we going to move forward? I don't know if removing FEMA would have helped Virginia recover faster. Maybe it could have, but either way, let me know in the comments about your thoughts in general.